Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Zapdos Master 145, continuing on with this series of reading and commenting or providing commentary for Under Absolute Despotism. Today we are going to be reading Chapter 2. This is a really good chapter, one of my favorite chapters probably because of the big reveal at the end, which we will get to. I think I should apologize for the previous video. I forgot to mention that I'd probably be discussing a lot of spoilers in these videos, so if you haven't already read my fan fictions, then you might want to do that before watching these videos, or maybe you don't want to, I don't know. I'm of the opinion that spoilers aren't really as big of a deal as people make them out to be, but that's a that's a story for another time. So we're going to go ahead, and you've been warned about spoilers, so now I can talk at length about anything and not have to worry about any subject. I can just speak my mind freely. So there we go. We'll just kind of do the same format as the previous video. I've got the chapter here that we'll read and go over, and then afterwards we'll go over the reviews. So yeah, let's begin. Chapter 2. Chapter 1 just ended, of course, with Phineas and Ferb having their lives in danger, and they get saved by a mysterious platypus. But at first, Phineas is like, "Oh, Perry, did you just save us?" And then the platypus uh, talks all of a sudden and just throwing everybody for a loop and says, "Hey, I'm not Perry, so you're crazy." And yeah, that was the end of chapter 1. So chapter 2 picks up from there. So here we go. Under Absolute Despotism, Chapter 2. Phineas was used to abnormal. He reclassified what was weird. He redefined the impossible. Yet it wasn't enough to prepare him for this. Phineas didn't know how. After all, platypuses weren't supposed to do much. But unless his eyes and ears were deceiving him, Perry had just saved his and Ferb's lives, was standing on two legs, had expertly exercised the use of a jetpack, and on top of it all, had articulated a full sentence in English by talking. After a few moments to overcome the initial shock, whatever reservations he'd previously held about what a platypus can and cannot do, Phineas realized that it didn't really matter. All that mattered was they were alive, saved by this anthropomorphic, talking, flying platypus. One word registered in the young boy's mind. Cool! Phineas smiled at the platypus that stood before him, for standing at full height put him almost as tall as the boys, and stepped forward to throw his arms around him. "Oh, Perry, thank you so much for saving our lives." The platypus tried to duck out of reach, alarmed. "Didn't you hear what I just said? I'm not Perry. He can't talk." Phineas pulled back. "I guess not," he decided, a disappointing look crossing his face. "It's just that you do look exactly like him." "You know, that would be considered offensive where I come from," the platypus replied, turning to look over the city. That line's supposed to kind of hint towards the discrimination that PJ has faced up most of his life up to this point. In his time, under under absolute despotism doesn't get into this very much, and A Gulf of Civil Horror gets into it a little bit. But PJ's backstory, which, if I were ever to write it, would make for the third book in the Despotism trilogy, actually would be more of a prequel. So Despotism would be book 2, and the prequel would be PJ's backstory and beginnings, how he came to graduate from Alka Academy and how he came to join the Secret Service. And actually, the story would be about his first mission to Mars, his first mission as a Secret Service agent, which is him going to Mars and protecting President Isabella. Spoiler warning: you've already been warned. You've already been warned. Spoilers in this commentary. Yeah, PJ goes to protect Isabella on a mission to Mars for diplomatic. Uh, she is going to Mars for diplomatic relations between, you know, uh, Earth and the Mars colonists, uh, as well as the Martians themselves. You know, the aliens that Candace became queen of in that one episode, where she goes to Mars. And so that's the kind of gist of the prequel, which is PJ's backstory. And yeah, he just got treated really poorly for most of his life, and so that's why he's kind of a loner in most of Under Absolute Despotism and in Golf in the sequel, and he just has a hard time making friends, and until he meets Phineas and Ferb and the kids, and they're the first people that kind of take him in and make friends with him, and so that's the whole story is PJ's growth from being a loner to growing into having his own family. So yeah, uh, that would be considered offensive where I come from. I don't know. I think I was thinking of it's like uh, discriminatory racist if you were to say something like, "Oh, all Asians look alike" or something, and so if all platypuses look alike, that would be considered offensive where PJ's from, and uh, also kind of a reference to the episode uh, when Perry goes off to battle the regurgitator and leaves his family behind. And the boys go looking and find every platypus in the entire city of Danville, and they all look the exact same. But somehow Phineas and Ferb are able to tell apart all these identical looking platypuses that look completely the same to us, the viewers watching the episode. So Phineas, if even Phineas is finding that PJ looks identical to Perry, that shows you how close they really look physically. And that makes sense because it turns out, as we'll find out later on down the road, PJ is actually Perry's clone. Not just his son, but his clone. Um, and that's why they look actually identical. And PJ's just taking that the wrong way because he at this point he hasn't really had a real friend yet, and he's just been a loner his whole life and kind of expects that everybody treats him pretty negatively. So yeah, uh, that would be considered offensive where I come from, the platypus replied, turning to look over the city. Yeah, so yeah, turning to look over the city, it's just kind of implying that PJ has a bit of a sad backstory that he doesn't really want to get into, but he's acknowledging at this moment, and that's not lost on the boys. Phineas looked at Ferb, who shrugged. Well, then where are you from? The new platypus didn't answer immediately. He merely paused before facing the boys again. Let's just get you guys safely back to your family, said he, indicating toward a set of stairs exiting the rooftop. Phineas didn't move. Will you at least tell us your name? The platypus sighed. I guess that much won't hurt. My name is PJ. Well, PJ, I'm Phineas, and this is my brother, Ferb, Phineas said as PJ moved past to open the door. Their mysterious new friend turned to hold it open for them. I know, he simply said. I know, he simply said. I think that's supposed to be a reference to The Empire Strikes Back when Princess Leia confesses to Han and he just says, I know. Kind of a reference, but just because I tend to write quotes more often than not. but it's not really a reference either. I mean, how can two words be a reference? Doesn't it take at least three words to make a quote? I don't know. There's some rule I'm remembering from middle school English class or something, or maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know. Anyways, maybe it's a reference, maybe it's not. It is in my mind, though. Candace was so annoyed with herself that she hadn't thought to just call Mom. Poor Candace. She always has to fight with the plot. That's the hardest thing to fight. No wonder Candace is so strong. She's like Super Saiyan strong sometimes. I sort in my head canon, because across the second dimension version of Candace is like super kick butt. Uh, she can she can like fight all the norm bots and everything, and so in my head canon, Candace has this huge potential that she's never unlocked to be like a kick butt spy, whatever she wants to be, and she just never unlocks her potential because she doesn't need to, unless except for the second dimension, her second dimension self. So yeah, also, this theory is further enhanced by every episode. Candace performs these superhuman feats of dragging her mom back to the backyard to show her what the boys are up to, whatever they're doing. That they shouldn't be possible uh, without cartoon logic and whatnot. So, in my mind, those two facts kind of establish Candace as having this huge potential to be superhuman, but she's not because she doesn't apply herself or anything. So in a similar way to how Phineas and Ferb are superhuman in their way of being able to do whatever they want, invent anything they want, break the laws of physics. That's my headcanon, is that Candace has this potential to be superhuman in her own way, and she never applies herself. Never has the need to unlock her potential. But anyways, I digress. It was so painfully simple. All this time, she realized, had been wasted trying to look for her, during a prime opportunity to bust her brothers, no less. Now looking at Phonesy Wonesy, Candace's little nickname for her phone that she only uses like once or twice on the show. I think the episode where uh, the boys create her a new phone because she's broken her own phone so many times. I think she like cradles it and pets it and calls it Phonesy Wonesy, and so I don't think she really nicknames her phones that much. She just was being silly and her normal Candace self at that point. But uh, yeah, moving on. Now looking at Phonesy Wonesy, she wasn't sure if she'd rather operate it properly or hurl it at the nearest brick wall. I I just I think that I do that more often than is really necessary. Like have Candace refer to her phone as Phonesy Wonesy just because she does that one time in that one episode. Fortunately, reason prevailed, and she dialed her mother's instead of hurling at the nearest brick wall. Candace is being dramatic as always. Fortunately, reason prevailed, and she dialed her mother's number, waiting for her to pick up. Yes, Candace. Mom, where are you? Did you see the parade? Oh, I'm so sorry, Linda replied as she and Lawrence drove along. An antique dresser with an inexplicable floating baby head tightly fastened to the roof of the car. Yep, there's the giant floating baby head making its appearance. Your father just had to have it. It's what is it again, dear? It's a colonial dresser with hand engraved markings, and an unusual accessory that I'm sure originated from the East India Trading Company, he exclaimed. A rare find indeed, and perfectly themed for a day like today. There you have it, Linda said, grinning slightly at her husband's giddiness. A colonial dresser with hand engraved markings. I guess trying to fit into the theme of being about uh, the Revolutionary War, 1776 or whatever. It kind of ties in, but not really. Well, Yes, but actually no, but actually yes, but maybe no. Yeah, I don't know. There you have it, Linda said, grinning slightly at her husband's giddiness. We're just running it. We're just running it to the shop to drop it off real fast, honey, and we'll be back to pick you up after. But Mom, Candace retorted, Phineas and Ferb were in the parade and they made these huge floats that had singing robots and a creepy fireside girl that tried to crush me in hydrochloric acid. Wait, that was probably just when I lost my lunch. But I almost died! Uh-huh, Linda said, barely listening. Candace is kind of exaggerating a little there. I didn't write anything about hydrochloric acid, but I don't know. I threw in that joke anyways, just for fun. Just because I wanted to say hydrochloric acid, I guess. Just because Candace wanted to say that. Uh-huh, Linda said, barely listening. That's nice, sweetie. We'll see you we'll see you there soon enough, okay? Bye. And she hung up. Candace clenched her phone and growled. Of course she doesn't believe me. Or growl. Of course she doesn't believe me. That's just my luck. Muttering under her breath, she stomped off to locate her brothers. Ah, just my luck, just like the episode name, Just My Luck. Uh, there is an episode named Just My Luck, right, of Phineas and Ferb? Now I'm second guessing myself. I'm a bad fan. I don't remember millions of trivia anymore. It's been too long. I think Just Our Luck. Maybe that's the episode name. Ah, man. Comment section. If anybody's watching this and you go look it up and fact check me, just tell me in the comments section. I'll be gracious and admit that I have it wrong. Maybe. We'll see. Back to the boys and PJ. So, how are you able to talk? Phineas asked PJ, who was leading the boys down the stairwell. Were you exposed to some kind of radiation? Or maybe you're some kind of android? Oh, I know. A crazed scientist had you drink a top secret special formula, and it made you intelligent. Is that what happened? Is it? PJ rounded on Phineas angrily. Look, just because I'm an animal doesn't mean I'm unintelligent, he growled, pointing a finger at him. You'd be surprised how much we really notice. Plus, you humans can be pretty dull-headed sometimes yourselves. Phineas took a step back. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to sound insensitive. It's okay, whispered PJ, taking a deep breath. I forgot. You're both a little young to understand what you're talking about. PJ PJ's thought process here is he's kind of mixing up his knowledge of future events into this conversation very subtly, uh, having been treated as subhuman for most of his life. PJ reacts kind of defensively to Phineas speculating as to his crazy backstory. Uh, of course, in PJ's time, anthropomorphic animals have become uh, public, not necessarily publicly accepted, but publicly known, and they're treated as second class citizens because they're not humans. So how can they be citizens if you have to be a human to be a citizen? But if they're intelligent, and in PJ's case, he can talk, they can get along in society. All the secret agents that work for the OWCA. How how do how does their existence actually work in the world? Just kind of thinking about all that, and it being the future, I just played around with that as a way to give PJ some uh, negative memories, I guess, or easy character building. I'll put it that way, giving him room for character growth by having him have a less than ideal backstory. So as that's all going along, PJ says, "I forget you're both a little young to understand what you're talking about. What he really means when he says that is, I forget you're not from the future like I am, so you don't understand the intricacies uh, of this scenario or this what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, I don't know. It's gone. But yeah, long story short, PJ just had a rough childhood, and he doesn't like to talk about it. And he's trying not to take it out on Phineas. But Phineas is curious, so he's going to keep asking questions. Huh, Phineas admitted. Normally, a sentence like that would leave me saying, yes, yes, we are. But for once, it doesn't work so much here. Oh, yes. Aren't you a little young to blah, blah, blah? Yes, yes, we are. Uh, kind of, kind of worked that line in there. A little bit of arm twisting in order to get it to work. And also trying to put my own spin on it. Normally that leaves me saying, yes, yes, we are, but for once it doesn't work so much here, just trying to make it a little different since you always want to, every episode has to include it, but have its own spin on the running gag. That's kind of what I'm going for. Well, maybe not the best example, but that's okay. Their web-footed guide shook his head and took to descending the stairs again. For whatever reason, most likely due to the parade, the building was virtually empty. They didn't see any signs of life while they walked. So how do you know Perry? Inquired Phineas. Uh, Phineas knows that, or assumes that PJ must know Perry because uh, their conversation on the rooftop seemed to imply that. So that's why Phineas asks. And so how do you know Perry? Inquired Phineas. Why do you ask so many questions? PJ replied irritably. An insatiable appetite of curiosity, Phineas responded. And for that matter, and for that matter, how did you know who we were? I just do, okay? He, PJ, raised his voice enough that it wasn't a yell, but the sound could be heard echoing through the empty halls. No more questions! The three descended for a minute in silence, but for the pattering of their footsteps. Each electric light bulb they passed under showed Phineas was struggling to keep his thoughts in his head. Then, like the gushing of a geyser that can be stopped by no lid, good imagery there, Phineas spoke again. So, have you ever been to Australia? You don't have an accent, so you must have at least learned to talk around Americans, uh, referring to how platypuses are native to Australia. Exasperated, the reticent monotreme threw his hands in the air. Why do you even care? He directed at Phineas. Another typo. That should be a lowercase h. I'm here on very important business, and having a friendly get to know you is not part of it. When he saw the slightly hurt look in Phineas's eyes, he retracted a little. Look, fellows, I'm not supposed to tell you about all that stuff, even if I wanted to. Why not? Asked Phineas. I'm just not, he repeated. You seem like nice kids and all, but I'm only here to do my job, and that's it. Okay? So let's just get you two back to your parents. There was a certain finality in his tone, and Phineas respected it enough that he didn't speak the rest of the way out. He still wanted to be polite towards his and Ferb's rescuer, even if this unusual talking platypus seemed a little anxious to get on with his life. They were almost to the ground floor now, and might I add, probably a little bit rude. Uh, this unusual platypus seemed a little anxious and a little rude. They were almost to the ground floor now, and they quickly made their way for the nearest exit. It didn't take long to find, and they stepped out into the bright sun. In a business-like voice, PJ turned to the boys and asked, So where are your parents at? Phineas thought. We haven't seen them since the parade started, but I'm sure they're around here somewhere. Suddenly, he snapped his fingers. I bet Candace is with them. He almost enthusiastically took off, sprinting in the direction they had flown in from. But PJ stopped him. Uh, also, good job, Phineas. Like, you don't even know where Candace is at the moment either, but you're just blasting off to go find her and not really thinking things through. But PJ stopped him. Wait, he commanded. I can't go out there like this. Like what? Phineas questioned. I have to look like an ordinary platypus, PJ explained. If people see me walking and talking, they'll get suspicious. I can't attract attention to myself. Okay, Phineas said, but why? PJ hesitated. It's complicated. Of course, all of us reading this fan fiction are very familiar with Perry the Platypus's secret identity, having to maintain his form as a mindless domestic pet at all times. That's his charge from OWCA, from Major Monogram himself. But the boys don't aren't familiar with that, and so they have to have it explained to them. PJ hesitated. It's complicated. Here, just wait a second. PJ crouched down on all fours and instantly became the spitting image of a mindless pet platypus. There, now I can accompany you to your family. And remember, I can't talk when I'm trying to blend in, so don't say anything to me. I know that'll be hard for you, Phineas, but from now on, all I can say is my attempt at Perry's chatter there. Who knows if the microphone's even picking this up very well. PJ's eyes unfocused. So, the person who does the Perry chirruping noise, D. Bradley Baker. He's the one who works for the show and does PJ's Perry's sound, Perry's little noise there. There's like video clips of him that you can look up, like probably search YouTube or something. I remember seeing it on the one of the Comic Cons that they had a Phineas and Ferb panel at, and D. Bradley Baker did the noise. He also does the noises for the animals from like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, etc. So he does a lot of stuff. The guy is super talented. Does all these animal noises for a living, among other things, no doubt. So the way he does the Perry noise is like he puts his hand over his mouth and kind of just like, I don't know, just growls into it and like vibrates the flat of his hand somehow, and that's how he makes the noise. I want to go back and study the video to try and figure out how he does it, so I can pull the noise off perfectly, and at least get that. If I can't do the other voices very well, at least I could do the Perry noise really well. That would be my goal. Uh, uh, for some point in the future when I feel like doing that. I don't know. But it would be cool. It would be a cool skill to have. Very, very useful skill in real life. Very applicable. Be able to do the perfect Perry chatter, just as good as D. Bradley Baker's is. Yeah. Too long of a tangent. No, that's what this is for. No tangent is too long or unimportant. That's what this is all about. But let's get back to the story anyways. Hold on. I'm going to take a quick drink. I'm glad I have my water bottle with me this time. My voice got really tired at the end of the last recording. All right. PJ's eyes unfocused, and he chirruped in perfect imitation of Perry's signature chatter. Well, what are we supposed to do? Asked Phineas. Pretend I'm Perry. Act normally. And don't tell anyone who I really am, or about what happened earlier. But what about Perry, the real one? He'll be back. Now stop talking to me. Even though it's a really short line, I think that's a pretty significant line. Well, in one sense, because the famous line from Terminator, "I'll be back." The Terminator as a movie has like almost the exact. It has Under Absolute Despotism has like the exact same plot as the Terminator. It's about an assassin who goes back in time to try to kill humanity's future savior or whatever in the past when he's still young as a child. Like literally, totally unintentional. I just came up with the story on my own, and it happened this way. That it has the exact same premise and story and everything as Terminator. So that's kind of a little bit of homage to that, and also Terminator is a great movie, one of my favorites. And but in another sense, the "he'll be back" line is important to the story because that tips off the reader that PJ really does know quite a bit about Perry the Platypus. Like, he seems to know all about his Secret Service, or excuse me, not Secret Service, his secret agent service for Alka, the OWCA, and that's kind of our little hint there. Just to get Phineas to be quiet, he says he'll be back, and just kind of leaves it at that, as if he knows what that Perry's probably out on a mission right now, and he's just trying to change the subject and avoid attracting attention to it. Now stop talking to me. When Phineas still looked like he wanted to say something, PJ cut him off with a forceful "Go!" "Okay, okay," Phineas said, and they began to move on back the way they came. It didn't take long before they ran into members of the crowd, for the parade was over and the people were heading home. They couldn't help but overhear some of the conversations that were being made. Most passers-by said some variation of the following: "Did you hear there was an accident?" "Yeah, a couple of boys almost got hit by a falling telephone pole." "I heard it was a falling cupcake." Oh my gosh, so dumb. I don't know how anybody, how we all know the game of telephone. You say something, and then the next person tries to repeat it, and so on, and eventually you end up with something completely different than what you started with. But that's the idea here. But that's a giant falling cupcake. So ridiculous. Uh, This is what I call. This is what I like to call SpongeBob humor. SpongeBob generally uses absurdity and randomness like fused into one. Absurdo randomness. Randsurdity. How about that? Randsurdity. That is SpongeBob's humor in a nutshell. Random absurdity. Just and that's funny enough, I guess. For some reason it works. Like, I think it's funny, even though it's so dumb. Um, Sometimes, depending on my mood, I like it. Sometimes, depending on my mood, I think it's really low brown. I try to go for more uh, a higher level of humor, trying to be a little more highbrow. I don't know, but gotta do what you gotta do to introduce a little bit of levity into the story. So levity there shall be, in the form of giant falling cupcakes. It wasn't a cupcake, you simpleton. What happened after that? Apparently, a flying duck or something caught them and flew away. See, at least that's some like that's at least understandable. Like a platypus, the weird fusion of a duck and a beaver. At least that one like you can at least see. Oh yeah, I could see that, but of course, I'm already about to give away the next joke that's about two sentences away. Apparently, a flying duck or something caught them and flew it away. It wasn't a duck, it was a beaver. Oh, right, a flying beaver. That makes as much sense as a giant cupcake. Yeah, good one. Hey, it could happen. And so forth. Yep. That's my sense of humor for you. SpongeBob. Randsurdity. But Phineas and Ferb uses it from time to time, so gotta stay true to the show. That's my whole thing. Is I try to be as authentic to Phineas and Ferb as I can in my fan fiction. Try to make my fan fiction feel as much like the show as possible. Even in this story, that is more than just another extended hour-long episode. It's even more, but it still tries to have the same feeling from the show. Phineas looked like he wanted to say something, but when PJ casually caught his eye, which was of itself remarkable, considering the platypus was presently cross-eyed, he shrugged and kept moving. The crowd was dispersing quickly, and they made good time on their way back to the starting point of the parade. At last, Phineas stopped and announced, "We're here. This is where we were at when the parade started. They should be around here somewhere." He and Ferb had barely begun to cast their eyes about, when a familiarly high-pitched squeal found their ears. "Phineas! Phineas! Oh my gosh! I'm so glad you're safe! I'm so glad you are safe!" Phineas turned to the source of the sound just in time to get his face enveloped by a thick curtain of dark black hair as he was tackled in a hug that practically knocked the wind out of him. "Isabella!" he gasped. "Ikagamoo! Ikagamoo!" Really good, uh, really good onomatopoeia there. Ikagamoo! Whatever he's saying. Like, I'll tell you what I think he's saying. I think he's saying, "I can barely move," but it comes out as "Ikagamoo." So there you go. That's the official translation. "Ikagamoo" means I can hardly move, or I can barely move. "What did you say?" she replied, releasing him. Phineas merely doubled over, inhaling sharply. "Oh, sorry," she said. "Oh, and I'm glad you're safe too, Ferb," she cordially added, with a pat on Ferb's shoulder, though it came out as more of an afterthought, and as a slap to the face of all the Ferbella fans out there. Yep, sorry, no Ferbella in this story. Not going to happen. "Boy, you sure did give me the fright of a lifetime." "Well, we're safe now," Phineas said, still wincing. "How'd you do it, anyway?" Isabella inquired. "Fly out from under that falling telephone pole, I mean. It happened so fast, even though I was right there, I could barely see it. How'd you escape like that?" "It's pretty simple," Phineas explained. "Ferb and I were about to—" PJ uttered, cutting him off. Phineas looked quizzically at PJ, wondering why he'd been interrupted. The reason why is just PJ just barely said, like 5 minutes ago, "Don't tell anybody about what just happened. Try to keep my secret a secret." And Phineas had already almost forgotten. But he kind of remembers, so he says, "You know what? We'll tell you about it later," the young inventor noted, recognizing the warning in PJ's tone. Isabella seemed to accept that. "Oh, by the way, Candace is here too." She angled her body away from the others, inserted 2 fingers in her mouth, and whistled extremely loudly. I wish I could whistle loud like that. I've practiced, but I can't quite get it. I gotta try it. I gotta practice that again sometime. Loud whistles are super useful if you can pull it off. Really useful when you need them. But for me, instead, I just carry around an actual whistle if I ever need to whistle, which I sometimes do, but then I never have it when I actually need. Why am I talking about whistles? Let's get back to the story. Whistles are boring. I'm just kidding. I said earlier any tangent is allowed, so get ready for some weird ones. All right, we might talk about whistling. I don't know why. I have a couple of dogs, and so I usually whistle for my dogs. That's what gets them to come over, or to come clean up the food that I spilled on the ground or something. That's their favorite job, is cleaning the house whenever food falls on the ground. And so whistling gets them to come all the way downstairs to whenever I spill. Clumsy as I am, which is not very clumsy when it comes to food, because I like my food. Uh, Funny fact, I was going to say this later, but every story I always have one scene where they're eating food, because that's just something I do, and because Everybody loves food. Everybody can relate to eating. So yeah, you can go on a treasure hunt and search every story, and you'll find a scene where they're eating food somewhere. Every fan fiction I write, that I make it a point. So Isabella whistled. Instantly, the troop of Fireside Girls gathered in an efficient line, front and center, reporting for duty. I was calling for Candace, you guys, Isabella informed them. Aw, they griped, about facing to march away with a noticeably reduced spring in their step. Of course, Candace is also technically a member of the troop, so she should have come when called as well, and she does, but uh, Candace isn't as enthusiastic about it as the other members of the troop. Candace arrived a moment later. Oh, there you two are, she said, looking upset, as usual, as she stared down at her brothers. About time you showed up. Just then her phone rang in her pocket. She whipped it out and held it to her ear. Hello? Who is it? Phineas asked. Candace ignored him, focusing on the muffled voice coming from her phone instead. Okay, she said. We're just hanging out here with Isabella. What's that? She asked when the muffled voice continued. Candace nodded once more and snapped her phone shut. That was Mom. She says Dad and her are stuck in traffic. And that's me being too lazy to write both sides of the conversation, so I just write Candace. Listening to it and nodding once more before snapping the phone shut, even though that's nonsensical because what's the point in nodding in a telephone call? The person can't see you nod. You have to speak whatever you're trying to communicate. Never mind. No tangent too weird, or this is really getting out of hand. She says Dad and her are stuck in traffic. Dad and she, Phineas corrected. Yes, the grammar Nazi, Phineas Flynn. JK. The grammar Nazi, Zapdos Master 145. Muhaha. I find every time that I miscapitalize a word. I've found that way too many times already. It's only chapter 2. Come on. Uh, maybe I hadn't fully learned that rule back when I was writing this, or wasn't fully solid about that rule of when you're supposed to capitalize after using parentheses and when you're not supposed to. And it's a rule. Look it up if you want to be a better writer, or don't if you don't. Whatever. You do you. Uh, Dad and she, Phineas corrected. Whatever. She also wants me to ask you, Isabella, if your mom can give us a ride to the park. That way we can go with you to the neighborhood barbecue. They'll meet us there. It'll be a tight squeeze, but I'm sure she won't mind, Isabella responded. Let me go ask. Candace watched Isabella leave before rounding on her brothers. Where have you two been? She asked. You know what? Never mind. I don't even want to know. With that, she turned and stormed off. Somebody needs to take a chill pill, Phineas heard from his side. PJ, I thought you weren't supposed to be talking. I know, Phineas, but your sister is seriously stuck up, PJ spat. She was a lot more relaxed when PJ caught himself, looking like he almost let something slip. And he almost did. That was intentional from a writing perspective because I wanted to hint one more again. I think there'll be many hints throughout the chapter that PJ's from the future. There already have been a few, and they'll just keep getting more and more obvious that. So PJ is referencing here Quantum Boogaloo, how when Candace is in her adult form and she's finally over busting in the future, she looks relaxed. That's what she gets described as, like 2 or 3 times in that episode, is how relaxed she looks. And so I'm quoting that episode to kind of hint that this is a time travel story, and PJ is a time traveler, and he knows what the future is like. And that's how he knew Candace before this moment, was he knows her from the future in her relaxed self. And so seeing her as a teenager, and her state of trying to bust her brothers catches him by surprise. She was a lot more relaxed when you what, PJ? When you what? Phineas prodded. PJ stuck out his tongue, choosing that moment to stop speaking English. Oh, we are so not done with this conversation, Phineas said out of the corner of his mouth, for he saw Isabella returning. And that's another quote from Across the Second Dimension. I believe Phineas says that when they're running from the Normbots with Perry after his disguise has been revealed by Second Dimension Doofenshmirtz. Phineas says that, oh, we are so not done with this conversation. Phineas said out of the corner of his mouth, for he saw Isabella returning. What you doing? She asked cutely. Nothing, nothing at all, Phineas said, doing his best to act natural by scratching his left ear. Of course, the episode where the boys become the Beak, the superhero, the Beak. Phineas has to keep his identity a secret, and that becomes his nervous tick in the episode is scratching his left ear. So whenever I write Phineas trying to hide something or keep a secret, I always uh, drop the hint that he's doing that by mentioning scratching his left ear. That's the prompt that Phineas is maybe not necessarily lying, but trying to not tell the whole truth. My mom says it'll be fine, Isabella, informed them. Hey, where's Candace? Quoting the Hey, where's Perry, but asking where Candace is. We'll go get her, declared Phineas. The transition to the park with Isabella was mildly awkward. This sentence has a little bit of history. I remember when I got to this point in writing it, I got stuck at the spot for a couple days. I didn't know how to pick the story back up when they were all going to the park to start the barbecue. And so I needed to end the previous scene and somehow transition to something else. Didn't really know how to do it. I was getting frustrated. So I wrote this sentence. The transition to the park with Isabella was mildly awkward because it's kind of also describes my transition in trying to change the scene. It was mildly awkward. I got a little stuck there, and so that's sentence has a little bit of significance and memory to this day for me. Mrs. Garcia Shapiro could be quite the chatterbox, and virtually monopolized the flow of conversation the whole drive. It at least brought a feeling of normality back after what felt like an unusually hectic morning. The lingering nervousness about Candace's fall and the accident at the parade seemed to fade like a dream behind them. Only PJ still seemed wary, though he never reverted back from his cover. Though he never reverted from his cover. Despite heavy traffic, they reached the park by close to noon. The sun was high and it was hot. There were a lot of people spread across the park. Apparently, this small neighborhood barbecue included half of Danville. Mrs. Garcia Shapiro needed to go help with cooking the food, so she left the kids to themselves, and Candace went off to find Jeremy. How convenient for the plot that the kids are all alone and not being watched by adult supervision for the next major scene to happen. Yep, totally by coincidence. Phineas, Ferb, Isabella, and PJ ambled about checking out what was going on. The community had organized all kinds of games, everything from pie-eating contests to ultimate frisbee to bounce houses to beach volleyball to a large slip and slide and accompanying water balloon fight were scattered throughout the park. That's an awkward sentence. Were scattered around throughout the park. Oh no, that makes sense. Everything Everything from, and the list begins, pie eating contests, ultimate frisbee, to bounce houses, to beach volleyball, to large slip and slide, and accompanying water balloon fight were scattered throughout the park. Yeah, that technically grammatically correct. Uh, I just misread it at first. A pavilion to the northwest corner was where the food was being prepared, and it smelled delicious. Only one thing was missing, and that was a Phineas and Ferb project. Say, Ferb, Phineas asked his brother, do we still have those animatronic robots from earlier? Because I think I know what else we're going to do today. Is there anything I can do to help? Isabella inquired. The latest in swim fashion would be helpful, responded Phineas. What? Replied Isabella with a sly smile. Want to see how I look in a bikini? Oh, no, Phineas said. I meant men's swimwear. Oh, it, I don't really like this exchange between Phineas and Isabella. Uh, Isabella's too young to wear a bikini. This is supposed to take place in the same summer as the show. They're still just kids, and in my opinion, that I can back up with facts and logic, they're about 10 or 11 years old in the show. But probably more like 8 or 9 years, depending on how you look at things. I don't know. Uh, Actor age has something to do with aging the kids since it takes place 10 years in the future and they're just barely graduating from high school, so they should be about 18. And if that's exactly 10 years in the future, that means they should be 8 during the summer, 8 years old. Shouldn't be wearing bikinis at 8 years old, but people do. I don't know. Anyways, you also, there's also the bigger issue that you shouldn't really be interested in the opposite sex at 8 years old either, but that's a whole nother can of worms that I'm not even going to get into right now. Anyways, I don't really like this exchange, but I wanted con- to foreshadow just a little bit. This is going to have some romantic development between Phineas and Isabella, and also that they're gonna get awkward for a little bit, and this kind of foreshadows that slash, well, not really sets it up, just foreshadows it, I guess. But I don't know, maybe I could have thought of a better way to do it. Anyways, it is setting up the big project that the boys actually get around to building in the next chapter, chapter 3. So there's that. Anyways, I still don't, I'm not a fan of that exchange right there. Isabella trying to be what what is she trying to be? Sneaky, suggestive, uh, seductive, trying to get Phineas to think about her in a bikini. I don't know. I don't like it, but it is what it is. It's there, and I'm too lazy to change it or try to think of something better. Isabella blushed and looked away. Fortunately, she was saved from any awkward silence. A frantic Beljeet appeared at a run and tried to duck behind her, but to no avail. Buford found the group at that moment and announced his arrival by casting a water balloon at the displeased face of the nerd. Oh, hello, everyone, Beljeet said before vigorously shaking the water out of his hair. Buford just laughed. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Buford laughed, yeah. Hey, guys, Phineas greeted in return. Having fun? Yeah, Buford said. I haven't had this much fun in ages. And want to know what I've always wondered? Trying to imitate Buford's raspy voice. You have to spend lots of hours screaming in a closet to develop that kind of raspiness. And I confess that I have not screamed for very many hours in any closet by myself in my life. I've not spent a lot of time doing that. Want to know what I've always wondered? What? Phineas asked, not seeing the twinkle in the bully's eyes until it was too late. I've always wondered if your nose was pointy enough to pop a water balloon. At that, Buford snatched a water balloon from his pocket and smacked Phineas in the face with it, gushing water all over the both of them. And it totally is! Ah ha ha! Chuckle, chuckle. Did you just say chuckle chuckle? Beljeet questioned. Got a problem with it? Buford leered. Beljeet backed off. Little bit of comedic levity in this story right there. Buford and Beljeet, that's all you're good for. They're not my favorite characters personally. I sometimes struggle writing Beljeet and Buford, but they're integral to the show and need to be in just about every episode, so I make an effort to put them in as often as possible, despite feeling inadequate at writing them sometimes. I feel like I get them pretty well in this scene, and most of the time, but sometimes I'm not so sure. Phineas wiped his eyes clear, but the smile never left his face. I guess I walked into that one, didn't I? He quipped, not angry in the slightest. Yes, Isabella obligatorily replied. Yes, you did. The old yes, yes, we are phrase, so kind of, but not really, but yes, but actually no. Again, I do that a lot. Everyone laughed at that. Even Ferb gave a soft snort. Ooh, Ferb, breaking that stoicism. Out of character. Bad. Just kidding. Suddenly, Buford cupped a hand to his ear. You guys hear that? He asked, face lighting up like Christmas. It's the ice cream truck! The rest of the group listened, and sure enough, the tinkling tune of a music box played somewhere in the distance. In unison, kids around the park were turning, listening, then gleefully heading in the direction of the noise. Buford dashed off. Oh, Buford first! They heard him yell. Uh, that line is in the episode "That Sinking Feeling" when the boys reconstruct the Titanic and help Beljeet with his childhood friend Mishti. When they take the emergency slide to get off the sinking ship, Buford said, dressed as a cupid in a diaper, Buford says, "Oh, Buford first!" and gets on the water slide first. So yeah, a little fun factoid. Come on, guys, Phineas made to follow. Let's go get some ice cream. All right, Isabella cheered at the suggestion. Baljeet hesitated. Would it not spoil our lunch? You always have to be careful writing Baljeet to never use contractions. He has a great fear of them, apparently. At least that's what he says when he's inside Candace's mind in the episode where they go all Inception with Candace's brain, going into her ego and id and super id or whatever. But also he never uses contractions throughout the series. Uh, there might be once or twice where you can catch a slip up, but there maybe none come to mind. So maybe I'm making this up. But yeah, for the most part, Belgique never uses contractions. So that's my writing tip of the day. Always check your lines from Belgique for contractions. He does not use them. There is no candy in him. I always say that. That's like my favorite Belgique quote. There is no candy in me. SpongeBob humor again. Absurd randomness. Random absurdity. Um, would it not spoil our lunch? Yes, yes, it would spoil your lunch. Don't eat ice cream before lunch, even though that's the thing that every kid wants to do and dreams of. I'm too much of a grown up. I'm so boring and lame. Wish we could all be kids. My childhood was great. I'm very nostalgic of my childhood. You don't have to come if you don't want to, Isabella said over her shoulder. Beljeet sighed and followed the others to the curbside. The line was already long by the time they got there. As they waited, Buford passed by licking a fudge bar. I was first, he proudly announced to nobody in general on his way by. That's right, you losers. I was first. Finally, they reached the front of the line. The ice cream truck driver was an attractive looking woman with beautiful curly blonde hair. Ah, here we go. Susie's big introduction. She seemed to be in her 30s, perhaps, but she looked young for her age. She turned to Isabella with a kind look in her eyes and said, "And what can I get for—" Oh, my Susie voice. "And what can I get for you, pretty girl?" Oh, geez. All these high-pitched voices, they're so hard for me. "Can I get a rainbow ripple bar?" Isabella asked. "Why, certainly," the woman said sweetly, and disappeared for a moment from the window. When she reappeared, she had a sad look. "Oh, I'm sorry, but I can't seem to find any." Um, Imagine the way she says, "I'm sorry," right there. Imagine she's saying that exactly the way that Susie says, "I'm sorry, we seem to be breaking up" in the haunted house episode. Um, Candace is like, "Stop crinkling paper. I know that trick." uh, by the way, probably my single favorite non-special extended episode, not counting movies or hour-long episodes. The one little scare ought to do it is probably, if you held a gun to my head and asked me to name my favorite Phineas and Ferb episode, I would have to say that one. I've watched it so many times I could probably recite the whole episode from memory. Um, so yeah, Susie, in my mind, Susie says that the exact same way that she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, we seem to be breaking up." Stop crinkling paper. I know that trick. Every time. I still laugh at that every time to this day. To this day. "I'm sorry, but I can't seem to find any rainbow ripple bars," which Isabella would definitely get if she was getting ice cream from an ice cream truck. That's the perfect colorful ice cream that Isabella. Can't you just see Isabella wanting to get that? Probably has a picture of a unicorn or something on it. "Oh," Isabella said, "it's okay. I can get something else." "No, please," the woman said in a kind voice. "I know I have more in stock somewhere. Would you mind coming into the van to help me look?" The hard thing is that Susie's a toddler in the show, uh, and sometimes she speaks, but she's still precocious for being a toddler. So sometimes she can speak really well, but most of the time, particularly around Jeremy, she's trying to look cute and innocent and still play that role of being a toddler. So most of her lines are spoken in her cutesy toddler voice. And so, despite carefully watching and analyzing every single episode Susie appears in before sitting down to write under Absolute Despotism, it was still pretty hard to find ways to age up her character into an adult, but still be trying to keep her in character. But I tried, and that's just one example. The "oh, I'm sorry" being something that she actually does say, so I could at least hear her in my mind's voice saying that as I'm writing to try to keep her pretty in character as I was going along, or at least as best as I could. But sometimes you just had to throw it all out the window and take her wherever the scene and her character is taking her. And so right now she's being an evil villain in an ice cream van trying to kidnap the kids. And so that's where she's going right now. And action, right? Well, like suddenly I'm a director now. Action. It's okay, Isabella tilted her head slightly. "I don't want to be a bother. Also, very bad to get into vans with strangers. Don't ever do that if you're listening, children. Never get into a van with a stranger." Like, come on. Your parents have to be teaching you that from a young age. So apparently, Phineas, Ferb, and Isabella did not learn that lesson at a young enough age because they're about to. Oh man, really. If somebody made a how it should have ended for under absolute despotism, there you go. That's what you do. Don't get into a van with strangers. Story over. uh, yeah. Moving on. Lost my spot. I don't want to be a bother. Oh, it's no bother, my dear. In fact, you two boys, she indicated, pointing at Phineas and Ferb. You can come in too and help us look. Phineas looked at the others. Well, okay, he said, if it's all right for us to be in there. Oh, don't be silly. Come on in through this door and go check the back of the van. Don't do it, kids. Don't get into the van with strangers. Stranger danger, stranger danger. The woman opened the driver's side door, and Phineas, Ferb, and Isabella climbed in. They made their way to the back, inspecting every box of ice cream they passed. I found it! Phineas exclaimed. It was right here. I don't know how you could miss it. He bent down to pick it up. The moment he touched the box, the top burst open and coils of rope looped themselves around the three children. Hey, this isn't ice cream. This is rope, he stated the obvious. doesn't that doesn't that sound like it came straight from a Scooby-Doo Hanna-Barbera episode? Uh, and we're back. I had to pause for a second there. So, where were we? Ah, yes, they just barely got into the van, and dun dun dun, it was a trap. This isn't ice cream, this is rope. That's right. Uh, so Susie isn't exactly your typical villain. Uh, I mean, what is your typical villain? Just a love muffin not a love muffin evil scientist. Basically, that's your typical villain in Phineas and Ferb. And Susie's not a scientist. She's not love muffin associate affiliated. So I've always thought to myself, this technically shouldn't make sense. Her having a trap with rope to trap the kids in. That's an evil scientist thing. But I guess for the sake of this story, that's just going to be a general Phineas and Ferb villain thing. Is that you use traps to catch your arch enemy or your nemesis or whatever. If Phineas, Ferb, and Isabella are considered Susie's nemesis, Nemi people, yeah, whatever, nemesises in this story. Uh, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Really, PJ's her true nemesis, if anything. If PJ is to Perry what Susie is to Doofenshmirtz in Under Absolute Despotism. So, uh, why does she have a trap set? Uh, I guess that's just the way that you villain when you're a Phineas and Ferb villain. When you're a bad guy in the Phineas and Ferb universe, you just set traps. That's what you do, and this won't be the last time she does. That she sets a trap, even though she's not a scientist. So how does she invent these traps? I don't know. She's from the future. Use that. That's your explanation. Somehow she's from the future. That solves everything. He, this isn't ice cream, this is rope, he stated the obvious, finding himself bound tightly with arms pinned at his side. I'm sorry, we're closed now. See, there it is again. I'm sorry, we seem to be breaking up. Yep. Uh, using using similar familiar lines for Susie to try to characterize her. Uh, even though Susie's identity won't be revealed for quite a few chapters. But still trying to pay attention to the details because I think the details are important. The woman called out the window before shutting and locking it. A steel mesh cage that had been hidden before now crashed down to seal the kids in, and she laughed wickedly as she jumped in the driver's seat, revved the engine, and sped off with them in tow. Hey, what gives? Phineas yelled through the cage in the rear. I'm starting to think you aren't a nice ice cream truck lady after all. The blonde woman cackled loudly. That's because I'm not, she said. You're kidnapping us, Isabella accused from Phineas's side. Right you are, my dear, the woman observed. You are both pretty and smart. What do you want with us? Phineas asked. Oh, it's quite simple, really, she answered. I want you gone. Lost. Forgotten from history. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make it so that you aren't remembered by anything but an obscure obituary from long ago. There we go again, hinting of the time travel coming up, the time travel reveal. Her face glinted pure evil as she cackled again. Yeah, hinting at the time travel reveal and also being cliche, spouting nonsense for dialogue from the point of view of the uh, people that she's talking to. But uh, any of the more careful readers should be pretty sure by now that this is a time travel story and she's probably from the future and her motives are starting to come into perspective a little bit. That's what that line should be doing. Her face glinted pure evil as she cackled again. What are you talking about? Phineas asked. Why are you doing this? You do ask a lot of questions, don't you, boy? Oh, I'm supposed to use the Susie voice. You do ask a lot of questions, don't you, boy? That's what I'm told. In fact, he was just told that by PJ earlier this chapter. And it's like I planned that transition or something. Enter PJ. A loud thud sounded suddenly from the roof. What was that? The woman asked. Everyone watched, stunned to paralysis, as a blue flame peeked through the metal and slowly drew a foot-wide circle. We have a visitor, the woman exclaimed, and she swerved hard to the side. That seemed to work, as there was a slamming noise and the blue flame disappeared, but it was back in seconds to continue its work. I think it's PJ, Phineas whispered to the others. Who's? Isabella tried to ask, but was stopped when she lost her balance by another swerve. Phineas did his best to catch her, but that proved difficult while tied up, meaning he mostly shoulder checked her into the stable corner. Into the stable corner. It's not a corner of a stable. They're not in the stable. The corner stable is describing the corner. The corner itself is stable. Why am I explaining this? I don't know. Should be implied. Here's what I should say. Finnabella moment. Yay, woo, right everyone? Like, to me, who cares? I don't really care about Finnabella. Actually, no, I'm a Finnabella supporter, but I'm just not necessarily, especially as a fan fiction writer, I'm not in it for the romance necessarily. Like the way that most people are. So I kind of roll my eyes whenever people get all hyped up about whatever ship they're trying to ship and whatnot. And of course, this story is kind of my really first. Well, that's not true. I wrote in praise of romance before I wrote Under Absolute Despotism, and that was my first really big foray into romance. But that was also kind of me making fun of it without letting people know that I was actually making fun of them for it. So, not a lot of people know. So yeah, it's more accurate to say that Despotism is my first uh, serious Finnabella take, uh, if you will. So yeah, big Finnabella moment right there. Probably the last one before the major Finnabella reveal at the end of the chapter. You okay? Phineas asked. Yeah, I'm good, she said, blushing a little when she realized how close they were leaning now. Above, the circle in the ceiling completed itself and the metal piece fell through, creating a foot-wide hole. A platypus jumped through, landing in a ninja-like pose. Inside the cage the others were trapped in. Wah! Evil laugh. The kidnapper laughed evilly. They're a villain. Pulling over to climb out of the driver's seat and meet the new prisoner. This has to be the. Oh, Susie voice. This has to be the most pathetic rescue attempt I've ever seen. Now you're trapped in there too, you. Oh, you're a platypus. By the way, for future reference, this is more true for Gulf than for despotism. What I'm about to say is so not necessarily the case in despotism, but in Gulf, I started to really imagine Susie's voice as sounding like Harley Quinn. So you can kind of read her voice that way, if you will, as if Harley Quinn's voice, because I discovered the Arkham Asylum the Arkham series, and it became one of my favorite video games. Uh, Probably not long after I wrote Despotism, or maybe let's see, uh, when was it published again? Oh yeah, 2014. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember. I probably played the Arkham games before then. So, but it was especially more so down the road when I was writing Golf that the influence started to really rub off, and I had Susie's voice in my mind sounding more and more like Harley Quinn. So you can use that, but at the same time, also she sounds somewhat like an aged up version. She should sound like an aged up version of her toddler self we know from the show. Like that would make sense. That's what she should sound like. You can't really convey that in a story necessarily uh, until you have a person who actually is hired to be the voice actor. I guess not me. I'm not a voice actor, as you can probably tell. So me struggling to do a single voice. Probably my terrible Perry chatter, or in this case, PJ chatter, has been my most successful voice thus far. I'm trying, you guys. I'm trying. Let us go, Phineas demanded, glancing at Isabella. Phineas, PJ said confidently, while putting his body between the woman and kids. Stand back. I have this completely under control. Maybe since PJ is my character, my first big OC, you can just be my voice. So whatever my voice sounds like, that's PJ's voice. There you go. How about that? I'm a voice actor now. Yay! Good job, me. Yeah. He talks, Isabella squeaked. You talk? The woman echoed. Well, now that is interesting. There aren't supposed to be any talking animals for at least another 25 years. That should be another tip off right there. Because, as we'll find out in the second to last chapter, Susie has her own animal pet, just like PJ, that's been anthropomorphized and has uh, was born in a test tube and all that, just like PJ. Part of PJ's same experiment to create super soldiers out of animals. We'll learn all about that in a couple chapters. So Susie, not only that, she's the director of the CIA, so she should know her stuff, and she should know that the Alka experiment to create a super soldier from animals shouldn't happen for another 25 years, about 10 years ish, give or take, before the bulk of Gulf of Civil Horror happens. And anyways, PJ picks up on this because the next thing he says is, "Who are you?" PJ shouted. But anyways, yeah, for at least another 25 years. That should be another tip to the reader that this is a time travel story and this person's from the future. And you should know this by now. It's been drummed over your head a couple times at this point. The woman thought for a moment. I am someone who envisions a new future, and I'm guessing you would know something about that, wouldn't you? PJ growled. Oh, there's our first hint that PJ is also definitely probably from the future. Just like Terminator and Kyle Reese from the Terminator, the assassin from the future, and Kyle Reese, the protector from the future, is PJ's role. It's just that there's no Sarah Connor that Kyle Reese falls in love with in this case. PJ, he just sticks with his bodyguard role. That's all he does. That's the one difference between Despotism and Terminator. See, it's not a complete ripoff, you guys. I swear, it's not a complete ripoff. It is technically slightly different. One minor difference. Phineas spoke up. What is she talking about? He asked PJ. Oh, you haven't told them? The woman laughed. Figures. You're probably afraid of messing up the whole space-time continuum and everything. Well, let me enlighten you. I'll tell you how it ends right now. You will fail. I have already foreseen it. Um, Probably a continuity error there. Uh, in a Gulf of Civil Horror, we find out Susie goes and visits the future to uh, make sure that she wins, and to study the future to as she makes her plans to try to help the Conspirium overthrow the United States of America. So at that point, yeah, she's been to the future and has already seen it. But at this point, right here, right now, in Despotism, probably not. I don't think she's been. She shouldn't have been that far to the future yet. So this line has been kind of retconned as of Gulf, but it does serve its purpose of, if you haven't figured it out by now, that's kind of the giveaway that she's from the future. She's talking about the space-time continuum, the whole sci-fi trope of not telling people things they shouldn't know about the future, etc. We should have gotten it by now. Whoever the reader should have definitely figured it out by now. And it's just seeing how it plays out and confirming that that's the case. Save it, PJ barked. Even though he's a platypus, dogs bark. I don't know what platypuses do. They chirrup. That's usually the word I like to use in my fan fictions when naming the platypus's little sound that D. Bradley Baker invented. I call it a chirrup. So yeah, but whatever. PJ's barking right now. I think I say that he. I think I just am trying to use vary my word choice. So yeah, PJ barks here. Whatever. I mean, bark doesn't necessarily mean bark like a dog. It just means you're like aggressively speaking, talking angrily or something. Yeah. The future is never certain. We have stopped people like you before and will stop you again. You may, for a time or two, the woman calmly stated. But eventually, as long as we keep trying, you will fail. Oh, I'm supposed to be using Susie voice. And that day we will rewrite history once and for all. Then it won't matter that you ever delayed our plans in the first place, because it will be like it all never happened. PJ turned to face Phineas, Ferb, and Isabella. Give me one moment, guys, he said. This shouldn't take too long. I can just imagine him cracking his knuckles as he says that. Then he whipped out the plasma torch he'd cut through the roof with, and effortlessly sliced up and down through the mesh wall, quickly splicing it into a door frame they could all fit through. Now, he smirked, turning again to the kidnapper. You were saying? But she was gone, out the open driver's side door. Yeah, there's that cartoon logic for you that They didn't even notice that she had just opened the door and started and ran out to make her getaway. They didn't even notice. Cartoon logic for you. PJ rushed out and scanned up and down the street, but didn't see any sign of her. He cursed under his breath. Oh, PJ, there's his first time cursing. He's got a bit of a potty mouth sometimes. Uh, in case you guys didn't know, I'm not a fan of using curse words and swear words in my stories. I'm not so opposed to it that I won't if I feel like it really needs to be there. But I try going to significant lengths not to curse in my stories, especially in my like a real episode type stories. But still, it remains true in my other stories that are a bit more extensive, if you will, like despotism related stories. And I think the worst offender is Lovetopia. Currently has like 5 or 6 curse words in it, but that's just because the characters, as I view them, they have to curse there. There's no way around it. They have to be true to how I envision them as characters. They have to. So so I make the story T because of that, and because of a couple other reasons. But we're not talking about Lovetopia right now. This is despotism we're talking about. So PJ isn't actually saying whatever curse word he's saying. It just he cursed. Yeah. So bad. Go wash your mouth out with soap, PJ. Returning to pick and tug at the restraints of the others, he asked, "Are you guys all right?" "As right as Copernicus," Phineas said as he wiggled out of his ropes. "Thanks for saving us again." "Don't mention it," PJ replied, once he had helped them all free themselves. "So does this mean we get to keep all this ice cream?" Phineas asked, looking about the cabin. "Always looking on the bright side, aren't you?" PJ asked. Suddenly Isabella interrupted. Is someone going to tell me what's going on, or do I need to go look it up on the internet?" I believe that's a reference to one of the Fireside Girls centric episode B story. I think it is B Day or B story, the one where they get turned into bees for the day to help with one of Phineas and Ferb's projects or whatever. I think that one of the troop members asks the question, and they're like, "Ah, Holly, you're so behind. Go look that up on the internet." Jeez, come on. Why do you even waste our time asking that question? Like, kind of a silly joke in the episode, and because you can't really look up stuff that happens in your own life on the internet. You don't expect that to be on the internet. Like, well, no. Anyways, I'd have to rewatch the episode for context to remember whether or not that joke actually makes sense. But I've always just remembered it for how ridiculous it kind of is, and remember it well enough to quote it. But I remember so many random lines from so many episodes in the show to just always quote them. Sometimes I can't even remember where I'm quoting it from. I'm just like, I definitely remember this line being said at some point, and I don't even remember where. But eventually, I go rewatch the entire series again, and then I remember. I try to rewatch the whole show every summer. Not always successful, but I try. She asked, sounding annoyed at being forgotten about. "Oh, sorry," Phineas said. "Isabella, this is PJ the Platypus. He's been with us ever since Perry—" "Wait a second." A light bulb went off in the young boy's head, accompanied by a snap of his fingers. "You are Perry, aren't you? Maybe you've just been pretending like you're a regular platypus all along, but—" "Phineas," PJ tried to cut him off. "But really you've been this kick-butt action hero who walks and talks and saves people's lives when no one is looking." "Phineas," he tried again. "Now it all makes perfect sense. When Perry's not around, you're here. Plus, you look exactly like him. Not in the way that all platypuses look alike. I mean, you could be his identical twin. Why didn't I see it before? Phineas!" PJ raises his voice this time, finally halting the boy's diarrhea of the mouth. I'm not Perry, okay? I don't have a secret identity. I don't go around saving people's lives all the time. And I don't wear a fedora. Phineas slumped. I know. I just got carried away. And what does a fedora have to do with anything? That's only a joke for people reading, of course. You have to be anybody but Phineas or Ferb to get that joke. PJ shook his head. Never mind that. Listen, I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but things have changed, and the situation is more grave than I thought. What is it? Isabella asked, noticing the stress in his voice. Don't you think it odd that your lives have been in danger twice today? PJ asked. Well, yeah, Phineas thought. I suppose so. And didn't you think it was weird when the lady that was talking when that lady was talking about rewriting your future, rewriting the future? Yeah, that didn't seem to make much sense. PJ nodded. That's because somehow she was from the future, and she is trying to change it. PJ expected the kids to be astonished, to be disbelieving, to be something, but they weren't. Ah, Phineas merely said. I guess that would make sense. Ironically, it was PJ that was now astonished. That classic sci-fi trope of time travel. I'm you from the future, and everybody's like, gasp, lay gasp. Having fun playing with that here, turning it on its head a little bit. You believe me? I can't. I come along and say that a time traveling woman from the future just tried to kidnap you, and you just accept it? Well, sure, Phineas stated. After all, you are a talking platypus, so what else is really that hard to believe? Besides, Ferb and I have had some time traveling adventures of our own. It's about time, cough, cough. Quantum Boogaloo, cough, cough. Although Isabella technically uh, undid everything in Quantum Boogaloo, so they shouldn't remember that necessarily. But whatever, pick your own headcanon of how that all works out. Time travel's messy. It's a mess. So's my story. So's my stories. Gulf and Despotism. They're a little messy. You just have to squint your eyes and have fun with it. That's what I do. Okay, PJ said, wiping his face with one of his free hands. That makes the next part easier. I am also from the future. That's why I didn't want to tell you about anything about me earlier, Phineas. I didn't want to affect the future in any way. I'm sorry if I sounded rude, but I was trying to keep you safe. It's all right, Phineas forgave. I knew you were just doing what you thought was right. But why are you here? To protect you, PJ succinctly stated. You see, in the future, once time travel becomes technologically possible, the government heavily regulates what kind of travel takes place. No one is allowed to go beyond a certain point in the past, the day time travel was created, to make sure that they don't try any shenanigans like creating time loops or alternate futures or paradoxes. To keep the grandfather paradox theoretical and not a reality, Phineas realized. Exactly, PJ nodded. The grandfather paradox? Isabella asked. What's that? Even though, personally, I'm of the opinion that Isabella would probably know what it is. Like, come on, she hangs out with Phineas and Ferb. She definitely knows what it is. This is for the audience's benefit, not necessarily Isabella's. That Phineas is about to explain the grandfather paradox. Simply put, Phineas explained, imagine someone goes back in time and kills their own grandfather. Consequently, one of their parents would never be born. Therefore, they would never meet. Therefore, that person would never be born. But if he or she was never born, how could they possibly go back in time and kill their own grandfather and make this all happen? It's a paradox, a logical fallacy, and that the effect must happen before the cause. It makes time travel very tricky. Exposition dump over. Not really. Exposition dump for the entire rest of the chapter. PJ gave an affirming nod. And very dangerous. It's only happened a few times. I'm part of the special government task force that takes jurisdiction over preventing something like that from happening. And luckily, we've been successful so far. So what did that ice cream lady want from us? Isabella asked. PJ bit his lip. This is the reason I hoped it wouldn't come to this, he said. No one is supposed to know too much about their futures. That's another retcon as of Golf. Because in Golf, time travel is like ubiquitous. Everybody uses it. It's like you drive your car to go to work. You drive your time machine in order to go to work in the 29th century or whatever. That's how time travel is portrayed in a Gulf of Civil Horror. So when when it's that ubiquitous and widespread, who wouldn't know everything about their whole lives from their birth to their death? Of course, you would know like the day and time you die if you could just go to the future and look it up or something. So uh, definitely continuity error when viewed after having read Gulf of Civil Horror. Uh, it would seem that I hadn't thought that far ahead when I was writing this chapter. I mean, it's only the second chapter in Under Absolute Despotism. What you're expecting too much from me to try to have planned that far ahead to know the storyline that far ahead, all the way to even know I was doing a sequel with this story. Uh, I knew at some point that maybe I had ideas for a sequel floating around in my head, but definitely didn't know that much detail about it. And honestly, I couldn't tell you when the idea of a sequel started to come into my mind. It was definitely before PJ returned to his own time at the end of Despotism, because the Conspirium gets introduced with the understanding that the sequel would develop who they are, what the organization is all about, what their true motives and goals are, and what kind of a threat they'll really be down the road. But Despotism doesn't really get into that, so definitely the inklings of the sequel were there, the seeds were planted. I just couldn't pinpoint exactly when and where. In any case, but for your own protection, I must tell you. Do you kids know about the Secret Service? The guys in black suits who were the president's bodyguards? Phineas asked. Yeah, they protect him from assassination attempts and stuff. They were formed to protect the president after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And the next paragraph has a bunch of random historical facts about the Secret Service that I definitely just pulled off of Wikipedia. Well, technically they were formed in 1865, yes, but we didn't protect the POTUS, sorry, the President of the United States. That's the acronym. If you read a lot of political thrillers or watch the news or anything, you'll see POTUS, the word POTUS, get thrown around a lot. It's the acronym for President of the United States. So I wanted to clarify that for any readers who may not know that's what that meant right there. Hopefully they figure it out, the acronym. Full time under the assassination of William McKinley. We didn't protect the POTUS full time until after the assassination of William McKinley. PJ corrected him. After time travel became a reality, an assassin by the name of Ricardo James Lewis attempted to go back in time to the 70s to kill President Clayton while he was still a baby. That's the 1970s, by the way, violating the time travel rule of not going back in time to before the day time travel was invented, which is May 18th, 2043, in the uh, Golfiverse, Despotism verse, the universe of Despotism and Golf. So that's your little bit of history there. President Clayton was still a baby in the 70s, and he is the president before Isabella, President Clayton. So that gives you an idea of some of the history of and the background history details of this story. Isabella wasn't the first president that an assassination, uh, a temporal assassination, was attempted on. Preventing him from ever becoming president in the first place. That was the first time we had to be dispatched for a mission in the past, and it was only natural that the Secret Service go. Ever since then, we have been monitoring monitoring the time stream carefully to make sure nobody attempted it again. And nobody has until today. By the way, in case it wasn't clear, the attempted assassination of President Clayton in the 70s was unsuccessful. Ricardo James Lewis uh, did not succeed, thanks to the Secret Service, in case that wasn't totally clear. But it's not too important to the story. Unless you like knowing your random trivia facts about some random fan fiction that you read by some random person on the internet that is not making any money or is nothing special. So yeah, there you go. You're as crazy as I am if you're that person. Like the only person crazier than the fan of some random nobody's story who's actually reading their story and providing commentary on it on YouTube. The only person crazier than the fan is that person who wrote it themselves. So there, that just shows you how crazy I am. You have to be some sort of crazy to be a fan fiction writer. You just have to be. It's not normal, but we do it because it's fun. So what you're saying is, you work for the Secret Service? Phineas asked. I do, PJ answered. Or to be more accurate, I will. In the future. But that still doesn't make sense, Isabella interjected. Why wouldn't the CIA handle something like that? Duh, you just said the Secret Service went because it was the president. Aren't you paying attention, Isabella? Uh, Isabella gets thrown under the bus there because I needed to just make that clear to anybody who might potentially have that question. Why the Secret Service, not the CIA or something? And maybe, I don't know, connect the dots because the first chapter mentioned the CIA. Just make sure nobody forgot. The CIA is technically important down the road because Susie's the CIA director. So I'm gonna just keep randomly bringing up the name in unrelated scenes or something. I don't know. Anyways, kind of an illogical question from Isabella there about the CIA. We let it slide because the CIA isn't responsible for protecting presidents. PJ paused, or future presidents. Oh, I guess also Isabella says that nonsensical line because it sets up that cool line for PJ. Because the CIA, why wouldn't the CIA handle something like that? Because the CIA isn't responsible for protecting presidents. PJ paused. Or future president. There should probably be a comma there. Or comma future presidents. Well, no, not necessarily. That's grammatically correct. No comma there. It just sounds like you would place a comma there because in reality, as you're speaking, there wouldn't be a breakup to say PJ paused it as you're giving this dialogue. Why am I explaining this? It's just a cool line. That's the important thing. Because the CIA isn't responsible for protecting presidents or future presidents, specifically, just to drill, to really let it sink in what he's really there for. And by now, everybody figures it out. It went silent as the children contemplated the implications of what this platypus agent was saying. A future president of the United States was standing in that very room. If you could call the back of an ice cream truck a room. PJ let it sink in. So that's why you were protecting Ferb and me, Phineas spoke. You knew that we would be in danger since you're from the future, and it's already history there. Yep. And you knew to get us out of the way of the falling telephone pole. And you knew we would be kidnapped by that ice cream lady. Oh, gotta get another quick drink really fast. Well, I didn't know exactly what would happen. I only knew an accident would happen during the parade, and that I would have to save the both of you. But things have changed now. Even I didn't know someone else came from the future to kidnap you in an ice cream truck. For all intents and purposes, my mission was just to prevent your untimely deaths at the moment the telephone pole fell. and we thought that was a pure accident. Uh, we, being all the intelligence workers and like PJ's boss at the Secret Service and everything, all the investigation and the timeline that they do. That's who he's referring to. Not very important, so I don't expound, but in case you were wondering. Now it's looking more like sabotage, and I suspect this woman is behind that, too. I need to learn who she is and stop her, or she'll just try to attack President Flynn again. Phineas looked thoughtful. Then he turned enthusiastic. Cool! Hey, Ferb, you know what this means? I'm going to be president someday. How awesome is that? Ferb returned a high five, but PJ quickly spoiled their fun. I never said it was going to be you, he informed them flatly. But you just said President Flynn. Ferb was born in England. He can't be president. It says in the Constitution that the president has to be born in the U.S., Phineas said. Not to mention the argument that Ferb kind of keeps his last name of Fletcher, and so Flynn also doesn't make sense in that sense either. It has to be me. Guess again, PJ said, turning to look at Isabella. Oh, and here we go. The uh, the most important scene in this entire story probably starts right there. Phineas and Ferb turned too, looking astonished. Me? Isabella asked after looking at the other three, confused. I'm the future president? How is it her? Phineas asked. I thought you said you were here to protect the future president, and so far you've only been protecting me and Ferb. That doesn't make any sense. Um, me and Ferb. Remember when I said Phineas when I made fun of Phineas being a grammar stickler earlier, and now here he is putting himself before putting his pronoun before the proper noun. Whoopsie, typo. Or I can just blame Phineas. That wasn't me as the author that made that error. That was Phineas. That was a choice on my part. Yeah, not really. That's not true. It should say Ferb and me. You've only been protecting Ferb and me. That doesn't make sense. Why would you be protecting us if it wasn't me? PJ sighed, growing weary of explaining. Because you are immediate family to her, and the Secret Service protects the family of the POTUS, too. Phineas looked at Ferb. Sorry, PJ, but you must have your facts wrong, Phineas said. Isabella isn't our sister. She's just our friend. We're not actually part of her family. Her last name is Garcia Shapiro. It is now, PJ replied. In your present. In the future, she changes her name sometime before she gets elected. Around the room, everyone uttered a startled gasp as what he was saying clicked. Everyone except Phineas, that is. uh, I imagine some of my readers probably figured it out right then and there, and maybe they needed one more line to connect the dots. Changes her name to what? Isabella Flynn, Phineas asked critically. Now, why would she do that? Think about it, PJ offered. So think about it we will. It took a minute. Phineas's face turned slowly from defensive to shocked, as he came to realize what causes people, particularly women, to change their last name when they get older. There was only one reason, and it was so obvious he didn't know how he missed it before. And hopefully all the readers figure out exactly where PJ's going with this now as well. by now. But was it right? Phineas thought back to the solstice only weeks ago, back to the moment in a moment in time he'd almost forgotten. Stranded on a tiny island with no hope of escape, he repeated in his mind the words Isabella had said. That's not the Phineas that I fell into. I just slaughtered that. That's not the Phineas that I fell into this situation with. Had she almost said something else? By the way, these paragraphs right here, as he's thinking about his past, his I almost said his past life, like he's reincarnated. Uh, as he's thinking about his past experience with Isabella, all the Finabella moments from the show, totally unnecessary. Why did I even include them? I don't know. We could have gotten the gist without him thinking about all this. Let's speed through this. Then he remembered the confusing moment they'd had when they were building the Fireside Girl marionette. Are you ready to take the next step? He'd asked. Oh, Phineas, yes, I've been right here in front of you all along, just waiting for you to. Oh, wait, you were talking about the puppet, weren't you? Of course he was, but what was she talking about? Did he finally now know? Uh, to date this story, I think that episode was like really recent at the time that I wrote this, and that's why I picked it as another example. He remembered earlier this morning how she'd worried so much when he and Ferb were almost crushed by the falling telephone pole, how she'd hugged him and held him so tight he could hardly breathe, only to turn around and offer Ferb a polite, nice to see you, even though he'd been in an equal amount of mortal peril. But that didn't mean, did it? Uh, maybe I just included that paragraph just to make sure the readers didn't miss the significance of that. Isabella blatantly favoring Phineas over Ferb. Not that she dislikes Ferb or anything. It's just obvious who she cares about more. Slowly, Phineas turned. So yeah, nobody missed the significance after that, hopefully. Slowly, Phineas turned to Isabella, and he saw her in a strange new light. Yep, here we go. Randomly, somehow figuring it out. I don't really like these paragraphs, as I had mentioned. They could do it. This story could do without them, and it would be just fine. But I'm too lazy to go back and fix them or change them or do anything with them, so they'll just have to stay forever. Her hair shimmered and her skin glowed. He caught her eyes. He caught her eyes, and she walked. I can't read fast. He caught her eyes, and she looked away quickly, blushing. But ever so slightly, they glanced back to meet his. Even in the muted light, he saw them sparking like fireworks. Oh, geez, love at first sight. Yeah, right, like that'll ever happen. Like that'll ever happen. The good old Shrek meme. It is, he tried to say, but suddenly found his throat very dry. After reading for like, we're probably an hour and a half, 2 hours now, my throat's getting dry. He forced down a swallow and tried again. Isabella, I know this sounds crazy, but in the future, do we get married? He almost whispered the word. Oh, I should say that. I know this sounds crazy, but in the future, do we get married? There, almost whispered the word. Before anyone could react, PJ threw up his hands in rapture. Thank goodness! I almost thought I was going to have to spell it out for him. He let his eyes fall back down from the heavens to look at the redhead. Man, for such a smart kid, you sure are dense. And there we go. That's the big scene, the big reveal at the end of chapter 2. Phineas finds out about Isabella's crush or something. Technically, he didn't actually find out about her crush. Is more like he finds out they'll get married someday. So I guess the story summary is kind of misleading, but still gets the point across in limited character space. But yeah, there you have it. And that's basically the single one biggest, most important scene driving despotism along. It was all the whole story premise came about because I thought to myself, hey, I wonder if Phineas will ever figure I wonder if Phineas will ever figure out Isabella has a crush on him. And as I thought that to myself, I then thought, no, the only way he'd ever figure it out is if somebody told him. And then the idea came to mind, well, it would probably be a cool story for that to happen. How do I make it even cooler? Have someone from the future tell him that they get married someday. Yeah, that'd make the story super cool. And so that's what I did and created the story basically with this particular scene in mind. And that is how it happened. So yeah, let's go through the reviews now and we'll wrap this up. First off, Snowy Owl 13. Remember, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up here. The Snowy Owl 13. I can only assume you're a Harry Potter fan and that's a Hedwig reference, but maybe there's a 1% chance I'm wrong about that or something. I don't know. Maybe you just really like owls, which, yeah, good for you if you do. But 99% chance that's a Harry Potter name and fan. Firstly, happy Independence Day. Yay, President Flynn. I'd vote for Izzy. Smiley face. I think PJ is Perry's son. PJ equals Perry Jr. Well, yep, there it is. Cat's out of the bag. Very first, the very first reviewer figured it out. PJ does stand for Perry Jr. Indeed. You're correct, sir or madam. It's obvious in retrospect. Yes, it is. I knew the creepy blonde ice cream lady was going to kidnap them. Also, huzzah for Phineas, for Finny finally realizing. Yeah, he realized something. Not everything, but something. It's so weird to read it right now because since technically we haven't reached the timeline yet in the real world. I mean, it's not even noon. So, yep, this review July 4th, and if we go back, we'll see. Oh, it doesn't say when this chapter was published, but the chapter was actually published on the 4th of July, so that the story was happening in the same in real time, more or less. Sort of like that TV show 24, where the show kind of happens in real time, but even more because it happens in real time on the same date that the chapter came out. So I thought that was cool, and I used that idea even more when I did my Doki Doki Literature Club story of having the story happening in real time as the story is going along. The chapters were releasing in real time, so that idea kind of probably developed first for despotism. And Snowy Owl 13, probably you live somewhere on the West Coast or something, or you read the story really early in the morning, if it's not even noon for you at the time you read it. So, yeah, extra coolness points. Awesome job! Can't wait for the update. Snowy Owl 13. LMPF. This is so exciting. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Yep, it's a good story, and that's a good sign. And LMPF, what does that stand for? Laughing my something that starts with P. Nope, PF. PF has to stand for Phineas Ferb. So what does LM stand for? I don't know. I don't know. It's not LMAO, it's LMPF, so it's not laughing my something off it. I don't know what it stands for. And LMPF is a guest, not a user. Agent B Tiger says, "So does PJ stand for Perry Jr. or something? XD smiley face, cross-eyed smiley face." Yes, it does. Uh, Phineas, we can't tell where your head ends and your hair begins anymore. Cross-eyed smiley face. Yeah, not Phineas's best moment there. That scene. Took him a while to catch PJ's drift, but he did in the end, and that's pretty much what we expected from Phineas. Romance is not his forte. So, what's Perry gonna think when he shows up? Oh, we'll find out in a couple chapters. I'm glad you asked. You were right about the more questions thing. XD can't wait for the next part. I should probably go work on my next chapter since I'm supposed to have it up tomorrow. I'm so totally gonna be busted. Busted! Agent B Tiger, did you ever finish that chapter? I don't know if you did. You might have, but I don't even remember. Um, I'll have to check your DeviantArt to look for it. By the way, everybody, Agent B Tiger has a pretty good DeviantArt page. Go check it out. She has got some pretty cool stuff on there. You heard it here. Epic Thoth 3 apostrophe S. Epic Thoth 3s. Epic Thoth. So, Epic Thoth, the apostrophe S was a gag because he wanted anybody who was talking about him to have to put apostrophe S to show his possessiveness whenever they're saying something about him. Epic Thoth 3 or whatever. he or she. I don't know if Epic Thoth is a boy or a girl, but I assume I'm gonna go with boy. That's my guess. 60% confidence interval. I think that he just he thought that was funny. He or she thought that was funny, and so that's why the apostrophe s on the end of the Epic Thoth 3s is his name. Originally there was no apostrophe s there, and they came up with the gag at some point, and so they changed their name. So yeah, a little fun fact about Epic Thoth 3, who's been not been around for a while. They left the Phineas and Ferb community quite a number of years ago. Anyways, they say somehow comedy and intrigue are perfectly melded perfectly into one, thanks to a good touch of good old sci-fi. Does this make Phineas the first man, if you know what I mean? Yes. Isabella is the first female president in the timeline of uh, despotism and Gulf. So what what they're called when the president is a woman and her husband is called the first gentleman instead of the first lady, which is what the wife of the president is called. The husband is called the first gentleman. So that's what the correct technical term is. Um, so there's that for your Gee Whiz collection. If you want to impress your friends and tell them what the husband of the president is called whenever we get a female president. I'm sure it'll happen someday. Platy Man, Platy Man, what a stud! This guy gives the best reviews. I swear. It was like my life's goal, my fan fiction dream to get a review from Platy Man, and this was it. This was the first time he ever gave me a review. So this was a good day. July 7th, 2014. What that was a good day for me. Platiman says, I could say a lot of things about what a really great Phineas and Ferb fanfic would be like, or I could just say, this is exactly what this fandom needs. Oh, shucks, making me blush. Even though I secretly agree. I mean, that's why I wrote it, because I thought it would be a good story. I knew I could write it good. I knew I could tell a good story, and so I did. And of course, I'm biased. Always have to pretend how confident I am as a storyteller and seem like I know what I'm doing. Takes a very deft touch to weave in some serious intrigue into a Phineas and Ferb fic while still keeping the tone and humor of the show. Um, kind of similar to what Epic Thoth 3 said. Comedy and intrigue perfectly melded into one. And yeah, I kind of agree. It's got that cool spy uh, action thriller element to it, uh, just like Terminator, but in a K plus story that still manages to somehow seem like it would fit in the Phineas and Ferb universe. That's what I was going for. It was an important thing for me to try to capture, and I'm glad people agreed that I did. Dialogue and humor in this is incredibly appealing and faithful to the show's spirit. Not only are all the characters perfectly on note, but the way the rest of Danville is behaving, from their silly street conversations and their extravagant enthusiasm for summer festivities, feels right out of an episode. Indeed, up until Perry Jr. shows up, oh, everybody figured out Perry Jr. right away, didn't they? That was the gimme. Nobody figured out Susie's identity as the assassin, though. This could very well be an episode, but it takes a turn for sci-fi thriller that doesn't feel out of place. I really wish that there were more fics like this one that took advantage of all the wacky science fiction hijinks that are possible in this universe and had a bit of imagination about its possible effect on the world. Really enjoyed the portrayal of all the characters. Phineas, in particular, the character that so many writers get wrong, is perfect here. Mellow, unruffled, but assertive in danger. Rather eccentric, but erudite in his manner of speaking. Yeah, I agree. Phineas is a really interesting character because, yeah, just like you said, mellow, unruffled. Those are good word choice, Platy Man. You'll always have a good word choice. Those really describe Phineas well. Um, I feel like, in my opinion, the special extended episodes where he always gets angry and yells at someone, I feel like I have to tell Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh myself that you guys are getting your character wrong. That's out of character for Phineas. He doesn't yell at people. Come on. He doesn't yell at his sister to get on the trike. He would never. That's not his character. That's. I find myself thinking that almost every time I watch uh, the Can Summer can no, excuse me, Summer Belongs to You episode. It's like the one flaw in the otherwise perfect episode. My favorite episode of all time. If you held a gun at my head and told me to pick an episode, and it could even be one of the hour-long special episodes, I would pick Summer Belongs to You as my all-time favorite episode, hands down. And then Across the Second Dimension is a very close second. They're both very good episodes slash movies. But anyways, back to it. Above all, both Phineas and Ferb actually come across as very clever in this fic, thinking their way out of trouble and intermediately trying to assess the situation from the available evidence. Also, good on you for allowing Isabella to be a high achiever. I am so sick of future fics that make her a housewife, glorified lab assistant, or slot her into one of the most stereotypical feminine jobs they can think of. Just because she wears pink and acts mushy around the boy she likes, they ignore that she has a range of interests and expertise that rivals Phineas and Ferb's own, and is as effortlessly competent whether giving orders or taking them. Glad to see her get some credit for it. Honestly, I wasn't trying to be progressive or feminist or anything. I just felt like that suited Isabella's character, that she, out of anybody, was most likely to be the future president someday. And it just seemed the most obvious to me, and that's the only reason I picked it. It just seemed that was genuine through her character. I wasn't trying to push any feminist agenda or anything or make a point. I just, you know, I think Isabella would be a good president. So that's why I wanted her, and also, of course, because of the obvious reason that uh, I could use this particular setup right here. Changes her name to what? Isabella Flynn. Why would she do that? Because women change their last name, and so that was the perfect way to pull off that reveal of Phineas learning that he and Isabella get married in the future. That's those two reasons. Then no other reason is why Isabella is who I chose to be the president of the United States in the future. Only thing I could say is that it needs more doof, but I'm sure it's coming. Thank you for writing. Yep, doof is coming. All right, got to wrap it up here. Got stuff to do. Avatar Lord Roku. I'm glad Phineas still has some analytical skills left in that noggin of his. Anyways, cool chapter. I'm excited to see who PJ really is and how Phineas will interact with Isabella now that he knows of her secret. Pickle 7, nice Finnabella moment there. Phineas finally realized. Anyway, PJ seems mysterious. He must be related to Perry somehow. Yes, he is. Guest, Squee. Guest number 2. I just have to say, that was the greatest Finnabella revealing in all of history. It was awesome. I love it. Yep, like I mentioned, kind of the big idea that drove the entire formation of the story. And I think it's pretty awesome. Piano Man 5, last one really quick. Phineas and sometimes the others have a larger vocabulary than I would have expected for their age. At least that's what I was originally thinking. But looking back at the episodes, it is fitting and common for characters to occasionally spout off much larger words, sometimes with comedic effect and sometimes just as normal parts of conversation. So I actually think that the way you wrote the dialogue makes sense. Can't remember if you gave them an age, but in this, but if they're older, that could also add to this. Um, yeah, I'd argue that Phineas and Ferb, all the kids as all the characters as kids, even though they're young, they still demonstrate pretty wide vocabulary for their age. Pretty impressive. Candace herself too, even though she's kind of portrayed as kind of a derpy at points, but Candace, she knows how to use her words too. So uh, Doofenshmirtz, of course. There's the Aglet episode where he's the only person who actually knows the word aglet. So even though English isn't even his first language, grew up speaking German, and yet he's pretty good with his English as well. So yeah, I'd argue that even as kids, um, it's not uncommon or unprecedented for them to say something like "as right as Copernicus," which you mentioned in your next thing. I had to look up Copernicus, then realized it was very fitting for you to include that type of reference in your story. My domain often finds its way into my writing as well lately. In case you didn't know, Nicholas Copernicus is the astronomer who proposed that the Earth orbits around the sun, in fact, and not the other way around. And so when Phineas says he's as right as Copernicus, he's pointing out that Copernicus was right, and not really matching what PJ said to him, asking him if he was all right, but being kind of as Platyman put it, Phineas being rather eccentric but erudite. uh, Time travel is hard to crack, so much so I've never attempted it and have no plans to do so. Frozen reality doesn't really count. It's a minor plot point. So I'm interested to see how you handle it, but I see you already brought up the grandfather paradox. I like this dynamic a lot of having Isabella be POTUS one day. Isabella's a natural leader, and I thought that she might be less surprised that she would be president over Phineas. But then again, it is the POTUS in the future we're talking about, and the family aspect is equally surprising / confusing, so I see where it's coming from. Again, yeah, I agree. Isabella would be a good president. Phineas's realization about marriage was great too. I first thought he'd confuse it for her and Ferb first, but then it would be Fletcher, so that wouldn't work. That is a lot of detail to throw at these kids all at once, and it will be interesting to see how they react in future chapters. Whew. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up everything for today's video. So I think that I will close here because I have something to get to, and it's been fun, you guys. This is Zapdos Master 145, and I'll see you again next time.